Oh, hey, everybody joining us at home. Today is the start of the week, and we're kicking it off with tons of content to bring you from the Conservative Convention over the weekend and updates on Tamara Lich's trial. Today is Monday, September the 11th. I'm your co-host, Tamara Ugolini, and I'm joined by our Quebec correspondent, Alexa Lavoie. How are you doing over there, Alexa?
I'm really good, and I just passed a really incredible, lot of movement weekend at the Conservative Convention.
Yeah, I'm excited to get your insider scoop and insider details on what happened, how it all unfolded. I mean, I'm sure people who are tuned in can dissect some of the biggest news out there, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But first and foremost, for all of our viewers at home, thanks so much again for tuning in. You can find us on a few different platforms. So we are currently streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and Getter. And because of the censorious nature of certain platforms, it's only on Rumble that you can support us through small monetary donations. So you can give us what's called a Rumble rant. And again, through a small monetary donation, you can have your comment read by us on air, whether that's a tip or an opinion or something that you would like to see us chat a little bit more in depth about or get a comment on. It's a great way for our viewers to interact with us directly while we're live. And we look forward always every day to hearing feedback from our viewers, our supporters, because we don't take a penny from the government. We're not a government funded media source. We rely solely on the generosity of our viewers, and that's what keeps us afloat. So we are here to hear whatever it is you have to say. So please use that platform if you so please, or if you're able to. Now, I did mention the Tamara Lich trial. So Tamara Lich is on day 5 of a 16-day trial. It may be 19 days total. The Crown has reserved, I think, 3 additional court dates, but today is day 5. And her, Tamara Lich, and co-accused Chris Barber are being tried for really petty crimes. So the official charges are mischief. There's 6 altogether. Mischief, obstructing police, and counseling others to commit mischief and obstruction and intimidation. So not only is she accused of actually doing those things, she's accused of also counseling others to do those things, despite the fact that there has been no actual crime. But maybe that's yet to be determined. So we have videographer Lincoln J, who is on the scene. He stays outside of the courtroom to get any notable people who are outside. And then we have our Ottawa respondent, Robert Kraychek, who is actually live tweeting. So you can follow both of those accounts on Twitter, Robert Kraychek and Lincoln J. We're also doing a nightly recap video, as well as a page. And so all of this can be found at tamaratrial.com. So the written piece kind of compiles all of the most notable tweets of the day every day. Then Robert does a nightly video recap. And just going up now, I believe it's up or should be up shortly, was a more in-depth interview with one of Tamara Lich's lawyers from the Democracy Fund. That's the Canadian charity who is providing Lich with legal defense at no cost to her. So one of their lawyers, Alan Honor, came with on Friday to do kind of a full scope recap and get some legal insights there. So you don't want to miss it. And I think, were we just showing a quick video there of Tamara entering the courtroom today? I think we have some clips. That's from this morning. Like I mentioned, Lincoln J is outside of the courtroom. He's catching those notable clips. And so some other kind of key details so far from Robert Kraychek inside the courthouse. There's some testimony that's scheduled today. The judge is supposed to have a decision here. I guess the Crown, the prosecution, has been filibustering with providing evidence and their submissions, which should have been obtained, I believe it was by August 1st. So we're, almost 5-6 weeks out from that deadline, which the judge found to be, I'm putting words in her mouth, but unacceptable, is what I would say. And so we're looking forward to seeing, it's very early on, but it seems like this judge has been taking a very fair and unbiased approach, which is, in my opinion, exactly how the judicial system should go and should be run, and something that we haven't had, and I haven't really seen much of throughout the last 2.5, 3 years. So we'll see as it unfolds, but day 5 is looking so good so far. What do you think, Alexa?
But I think like this trial, it's really important to watch, because that the result will show actually the full result of if this protest is peaceful or not. And so far on the trial, what I heard so far from Robert, it seems that everything was peaceful and everybody said that it was peaceful. And Robert bring that they were using the TikTok of Chris Barber for some of part of it, showing that Chris Barber always told the people to remain peaceful, and they didn't want anybody that will disturb the event. So they use that against him, but it seems that at the end of the day, the TikTok proved that Chris Barber didn't want nothing bad happen. He always say, we want everything peaceful. We just want everything go well, and we want just to ask and show our voice. And it seems that for now everything go on their way. Like everything is positive for Chris Barber, everything seems to be positive for Tamara Lich. So we just keep an eye on that, because the trial is going until October. So if you are more interested to know information about it, go to tamaratrial.com. You can see all the coverage, and also you can keep yourself updated on the last trial every day. It's 4 days a week, so it's pretty intense.
Yeah, it's 3 to 4 days a week, and then they skip a week. I had it written down on another note somewhere here. But anyway, so yeah, runs from the September 11th to 14th, 18th to 22nd, and then October 11th to 13th, for a total of 16 days of trial. Again, today is day 5, and then the potential dates of October 30th, 31st, and November 1st have been held for potential trial. And I think that was a big reason why the judge was upset, for lack of a better word, at the prosecution, the Crown, filibustering the evidentiary submissions, was because it's really a waste of the court's time, right? Especially been highlighted throughout COVID, is the severe backlog on the judicial system, especially with criminal law. And not to give away too much of Alan Honner's interview, the lawyer that Krajcik interviewed on Friday, that interview should be up, if not already, shortly. And it's really disrespectful to the people sitting in jail, or who may be waiting on bail, or so on and so forth, to unnecessarily tie up the Crown, the judicial system, for evidence that, I mean, you've had 2 years to gather it and submit it. It should have all been in by August 1st. And the fact that they're still giving this runaround, and the Crown, in their opening statements against Tamara Lich and co-accused Chris Barber, said that the protest was anything but peaceful. And yet, as you mentioned, Alexa, those clips from Chris Barber, from Tamara Lich, from one of the key volunteers, Tom Razzo, they repeatedly stated, remain peaceful, even in the face of police violence. Be peaceful. Don't resist arrest, et cetera, et cetera. If they smash your windows, if they're wrecking your vehicles, which they did extensively to these truckers, hundreds of thousands of dollars, worth of damage. And the truckers didn't do anything to retaliate against this. So I guess part of the witnesses that will take stand today, and this is again from Robert Krajcik's Twitter, or his X, that's hard to get used to, where he posted, he says, defense counsel for Lich argues that pending testimony from some scheduled witnesses, which include residents of Ottawa, business owners, and Ottawa City transportation employees, for the Crown, they should be gotten rid of due to central admissions. Okay, that's not the right one. The one I wanted to refer to was, that these people and their testimonies will apparently show and ascertain how this protest was anything but peaceful. So this still remains to be seen. Maybe there's some larger strategy at play here. Again, we're day 5 of 16, potentially 19 days of trial. So only time will tell. But if you want to support, if you value this coverage that we're giving this trial, because otherwise, you would have to rely on the mainstream media for their reports. And we know the way that they framed the Freedom Convoy while it was happening. If you think that this is important and you enjoy having this inside scoop of someone there on the ground dissecting this, giving these interviews, gathering this insight, then please consider supporting our work. And again, you can find out all of this. We've made a website, a URL that's compiling everything for ease of access. That's tamaratrial.com. Now, without further ado, Alexa, maybe we can go into a little bit of the Conservative convention that happened this past weekend in Quebec. So it was great that we had you, especially as a French speaker, to be there. And you caught not only some Conservative Party members, but also some Liberals who, I guess, in a way, tried to crash their party. The first one here is Pablo Rodriguez. So many of you may be familiar with him. He's the former Minister of Canadian Heritage. He's responsible for all of these online censorship bills. And then in the cabinet shuffle that happened just a few weeks ago, he's now taken on the portfolio of Minister of Transport from Omar Alghabra, who I would say was equally as inept as he is putting forth policy and legislation that actually works to do any good. Alexa, why don't you give us some insider information, what you were on the ground seeing and your reports there?
It was really, the Conservative Convention took place in Le Centre des Congrès for 3 days, but actually 2.5 days because it started really late on the first day. It was only the opening ceremony where we had like a couple of speeches. We had actually two former, one was the lieutenant and a major. There was Barbara and Michel Maisonneuve who did a really beautiful speech. They also bring the Freedom Convoy. They did like a really small segment about it. I had the chance to interview both of them. I also bring why it was important for them to bring the Freedom Convoy on their speech. And I think we have a clip on that. I don't know if we can throw the clip 4. It's Barbara Maisonneuve who actually speak why she stand by the Freedom Convoy and why it was the responsibility of Justin Trudeau to talk to them, but he didn't have actually any. This clip that we will just see, it's a part of their speech. So let's watch this one first.
Canada deserves a common sense Prime Minister who will unite us all, who will recognize, respect, and embrace the differences of this vast country. A Prime Minister who will make a policy that makes us all better and all better off. One who will bring us together with his vision and ensure there is a place for every Canadian on his team. A Prime Minister for all Canadians who will unite us by making us see that we count, that every Canadian counts, no matter who they voted for. If Canadians feel strongly about something, a Prime Minister should listen, not attack and insult them. If thousands of Canadians feel so strongly about something that they get into their vehicles and drive to Ottawa to be heard, the Prime Minister should pay attention.
So it was a really great moment and a really powerful moment, especially when you think that it's only the opening ceremony. And so it's why when I had the chance to meet with them and ask them like their opinion, we mostly talk with them about the national defense. But at the end, I wanted to have their take on the Freedom Convoy. And so I had a small clip over about the Freedom Convoy.
Do we have that clip to share as well, or will that be from the full report?
Yeah, it's from the full report that's coming up, but I share a small clip, and this is this one.
It still
Here it
is
is.
that all Canadians matter. It doesn't matter who you voted for. The Prime Minister, as the elected Prime Minister, is responsible to look after me as well. He's everyone's Prime Minister. So thousands of people were upset about whatever the reason is. If they come this all the way to Ottawa, they deserve to be heard. And what happened afterward was not necessary. I firmly believe that had the Prime Minister met the convoy, they knew, my God, we all knew they were coming. It never would have deteriorated into what happened, and we would have saved millions of dollars, and these people would not be on trial today. The result of the convoy was his fault, and he should have known better. And I firmly stand by that belief.
And she's right. Like, nobody will have been in trial today. Nobody will have been beat up, trampled, or even shot like me if the Prime Minister had just the courage to meet with the protester and talk with them. Because in a healthy democracy, it's communication. And if you cannot have that skill in this kind of situation where your own people are enough mad, frustrating, and desperate to drive all the way to Ottawa to speak with you, and you don't have like the single like courage to accord them a couple of minutes of your time, this just show that you are not made to be a leader of a country. So
Well,
yeah, I'll let you. What is your thought about that?
Well, remember the whole reason why he didn't come out and meet the convoy originally was he tested positive for COVID, apparently, for the second time, I believe it was. And I think he probably already had 2 doses of the novel mRNA injection at that point. And so he really went into hiding, because we all know that famous clip now where Trudeau says, oh, this is a small fringe minority on their way to Ottawa to air unacceptable views, is, you know, essentially both direct quotes and paraphrasing a little bit. And so I don't think, coupled with the Ottawa Police Services, who had also just instituted their own vaccine mandate and lost a fraction of their force, they were not prepared for the breadth and the magnitude of the trucker convoy that made its way into Ottawa, that really just continued to grow, right? There was that first weekend where they were completely overwhelmed. And then every weekend thereafter, that grassroots movement continued to swell that downtown core, and logistics were a nightmare. And that's part of the Tamara Lich trial coverage that we're doing, is sorting out some of those details on what went wrong and why. And so a big part of it was that the Ottawa Police Services were not prepared. They were told directly from the police were told directly from their supervisors, and perhaps there was political meddling in there as well from the Prime Minister's office, not to concede 1 inch to the convoy. They weren't willing to work with them. The convoy always did keep that 1 lane open for emergency access and traffic and pedestrians and so on. So I think we're going to find out a lot of these details in terms of the ineptitude that was at play, the political interference. And I hope that those details start to come to light, because it's a lot of things that we've suspected all along. And you hear grumblings about, if you have ever spoken to anybody who was involved in the Freedom Convoy, like Tom Marazzo, like Tamara Lich, like Chris Barber. I mean, the list is endless. There was a whole team dedicated to what they were doing and how to best get their message across, because I think we have to remember as well that Canadians had been ignored by all levels of government. If you questioned the COVID regime, if you questioned the narrative, if you said, hey, these lockdown measures are harming my children, you were framed as some sort of selfish grandma killer and completely disregarded and ignored. And so this was the culmination of 2 years of Canadians being ignored by their political representatives. Those people, you know, in a democracy that we're supposed to have, you elect those representatives to represent you. And what Canadians were finding was that was just not happening. And so they took to the nation's capital, which is historically where you would go to protest and air grievances, to hopefully have their voices finally heard. And instead of hearing them, Trudeau slandered them, name called them, gaslit them, And then you had their mainstream media lapdogs basically running a concerted, similarly, a concerted slandering campaign to paint these protesters as, this fringe minority with far right extremist views. When in fact, there was a diversity of thought, a diversity of opinion. And all these people wanted was to finally get back to the normalcy we had in the pre-COVID era. So the whole handling of this was obviously heavy-handed and shows how inept the government really has been. I would argue since 2015 when the Trudeau Liberals took office, but been very much heightened by the COVID response. So that was a long-winded way to get back to some of your clips. Sorry about that, Alexa.
No, but I was just saying that now we probably regret of what he did, because right now what we saw is like most of the conservatives that are not the fringe, but actually the opposite, that are voting now for the Conservative Party, that now is on the poll for more than 40%. So it seems to be like leading at the majority, are way, way for the trucker convoy. They are for them. They are with all their heart with Tamara Lich. And now I think like probably Justin Trudeau is just like, oops. So I thought I was actually with the majority of Canadian, but actually I was going against the bigger part of the population. And so that will play against him, obviously. And we were able to see, like, in the Conservative Party, I was able to feel the united side of the population. They were all together and they wanted to work together to get with some policy that was perfect for the moment that we live on. And I was capable to see that most of the policy that was on the table was in reaction of the bad policy or the bad law that Mr. Trudeau have imposed on Canadian. So just by example, we were talking about, well, of course, a carbon tax, but China foreign interference. We had they had the policy about China, the food sanction, because when you go in war, they had like the space of women in the society to protect their space. They had like also another policy on children to protect their mental and physical health. So avoiding children to do any surgery before the age of 18 when we look at gender dysphoria. So there was like a lot of different policy, and it was nice because everybody was capable to debate, communicate, and share their own idea. Nobody was put in the side because he was thinking differently. So it's why it was nice to see. And in response of many different things, like I know that Pablo Rodriguez went out really late after the speech of Pierre Poilievre. I know that Stephen Guilbeault also went out after seeing the policy of the party. And it was really hypocritical from Stephen Guilbeault. He just came back from China, and now he was in front of the Centre des Congrès to speak badly about the fact that it seemed that Conservative Party have no plan for climate change. But in the same way, Mr. Guilbeault go to China, doesn't challenge them on their practices on emission of
they're building all these coal-fired electricity plants.
Exactly. So sorry, it's just because you use like different letter in English and French. Also, we say GES, but he didn't challenge them on that. He didn't challenge them on the interference in Canada in our democracy. So it's really hypocritical on his side to just show up. And the thing is, liberal usually they have like a really controlled area for their media. So usually they are in their comfort zone, and now they arrive in a in the era where you have True North, you have us, you have many different independent media, and so I don't think they were prepared of that. They were like actually saying like all those media challenging them with like questions that they were not expecting, and so it's why like when Pablo Rodriguez came back like the second day, he actually focused on two media only: Radio Canada, that is actually the French CBC, and TVA, and he didn't like allow almost like nobody really around, or didn't give time to other one. But I'm working to retrieve the audio for one of the questions that I asked to Pablo Rodriguez, because I think it was accurate to ask him if to win the next election, a good strategy would be to ask Justin Trudeau to resign. And he keeps saying that Justin Trudeau loved Canadian, loved Quebecer. He was able to lead them to being elected. And he said that he will be probably able to get reelected again. And I say to him, like in the answer to that, he said, yeah, but if he liked so much Canadian, why did they spend the time to divide, polarize the population with vaccine mandate? And he keep answering to me until that I say, but what you say, okay, but do you think that we should tolerate from a leader to say, should we tolerate them in a society talking to people who are dissident? And so it was go on and on with him, and it's really, you need to understand that it would be really rare to see liberal to answer to independent outlet, because usually, as I say, they have a media control, so they are not facing independent media. So just the fact that you see that they are answering to us, that show that they know they are going to lose. They know that it's not going well for them, and they have no choice now to try to gain back some credibility among Canadian. But I don't think that will work at all. But if you take like the clip of Peter MacKay, he was a former general attorney, former national defense minister, justice minister, and it's really interesting because he worked under Pierre Trudeau, Harper, so many like prime minister, and look at what he has to say about Justin Trudeau.
Justin Trudeau has, in fact, surpassed his father in terms of the division and the derision and the anger and the destructive policies and the diminishing of Canada's reputation. I think he's outdone his father in terms of the damage that he has inflicted on Canadians.
What is it about?
Yeah. Well, I keep going back to the fact that he quite literally campaigned, Justin Trudeau, in the snap election that he called in the fall of 2021. He literally campaigned on the wedge issue of COVID-19 vaccination. And anybody who questioned the safety and efficacy of these novel injections was again gaslit, denounced, called conspiracy theorist, anti-vaxxer. The rhetoric that was espoused by Trudeau. I don't want to play the whole clip, but I think it's a 2.5 minute clip of Trudeau on stage rallying the troops, his liberal lapdogs, and his clapping seal liberal supporters, that you don't have the right to get on a plane, a train, or an automobile and put our children at risk. And like you said, do we tolerate these people? This is the most segregationist prime minister or global leader that we've seen in a developed democratic nation for as long as I can remember. That's for certain. And maybe I wasn't paying attention before, but this segregationist rhetoric is extremely dangerous, and it's a slippery slope. And you're seeing the fallout of it now. I think the Conservatives were, last time I checked, 10 to 12% in lead in the polls. Maybe it's more now. It's just so unfortunate that the Liberals and the NDP have this unofficial coalition, because they basically prop each other up to form a majority government as two actual fringe minority governments. They prop one another up to form a majority. And so the actual opposition that we have, which are the Conservatives and a little bit the Bloc Québécois, they don't have a leg to stand on as a result. And I also, going back to kind of the Freedom Convoy and how that was a bit of a topic within the convention itself, at that time, we didn't have a strong backboned conservative that was taking that oppositional stance. There was Aaron O'Toole, who was voted out of the party because he was soft on everything. And really a liberal in conservative clothing. And then you had the interim leader, Candice Bergen, who started to speak up a little bit more, started to be more oppositional, started to question things and provide that so needed and wanted opposition to the unabated liberal rulings. And then now, of course, we have Pierre Poilievre, which he's been kind of growing, elaborating further on what Candice had started to do at that time. And so I think that's why the convoy is such a key part of their convention, was because you saw there firsthand the silent majority. We always hear of, the silent majority, and they're just the people who don't want to be bothered. They just want to be left alone. They're happy to, go to work. They have a roof over their heads. They have a good paying job. They can feed, clothe, and shelter their children. And we're seeing all of that has been completely flipped on its head over the last 3 years. And again, arguably from starting in 2015 when the Liberals took office. And so the more and more Canadians are getting hit where it hurts the most, which is their pocketbooks, the opposition has more of that backing to and that leg to stand on with that silent majority who's not being silent anymore. And that is refreshing to see, especially as they vote on things like you mentioned, the gender affirming care for minors. And so we have a written piece here just highlighting the Conservative members. They voted to ban gender affirming care for minors by 69% of delegates supported this it's a non-binding vote. So we'll see what actually comes to fruition there. But 69% of them voted to ban irreversible gender transition for children and teenagers. And so that's referred to specifically as medical transition and physical and surgeries. So this isn't like social transition where you're just going by different pronouns or wanting to associate with a different name. But this is, that irreversible medical step that happens next, and this seems to be kind of infiltrating younger and younger demographics and generations to undergo hormone therapy and then these surgical procedures. So that's reassuring to see that we want to protect our minors, our vulnerable youth who doesn't have that robustly developed brain to make those reasonable, rational decisions for themselves yet.
And like for the people who like say, okay, this is like a part of it, but also in the motion, what they were saying is like increasing the follow-up with the medical professional to help the kids to with their mental health. Like if they are suffering from gender dysphoria, they will not let alone. They will be followed by the medical care really closely. So it's not just like banning something and not think about maybe some children who are suffering, because we need to say that yes, there is like children that are suffering from gender dysphoria, but they also came up with for solving a part of the problem until the age of 18. So I think the full policy was actually complete, and yeah, it was really controversial. I would say like a lot of people were talking about that during these 3 days, not knowing so much if it would pass the first step, because it had 2 steps. First of all, it needed to be adopted in the private room during the first day. And afterwards, it needed to bring in front of everybody and be adopted by not only the member, but also like the MP and everybody. So, so he passed. And regarding like the speech of Mr. Poilievre, A lot of media have talked about it, and it was a really long speech, but a really interesting speech. But I know that his wife did speak at the beginning, and this was a really beautiful speech, really nationalist. We have a part of it we can actually show. She also talk about truckers. If you read under the line, in between line, I say, you can say that she's talking the trucker from the Freedom Convoy, like, and also other trucker, but you will see by yourself.
But whenever I think we have it tough, I remember the extraordinary people that carry the country on their shoulders. The nurse, the waitress, the plumber, and yes, the trucker, who are suffering more.
We know that the nurses had like a really hard time during the vaccine mandate because they were facing losing their job after being like the angel of the pandemic. We know that the waitress had a hard time too because they were closing down up the restaurant. But the plumber was another problematic because we know that they needed to go to home, and it was kind of like really difficult. Some people who didn't want it to open their door to people who didn't receive the shot or everything. So, and the trucker, of course, because they had like a multitude of problem. Not only like the station was closed for them, but they had no place to go to the toilet, to take shower, to go to eat, and they were on the road most of the time. And now they were seeing like their job taken away because they had no option to go and cross to US and come back without doing a quarantine. So she talked about the extraordinary people because those people were there, and they kept the economy, and they kept like the society and everything going, same if they had a hard time. She also talked to Quebecer. Of course, like I'm from Quebec, so I understand really her speech. It was really beautiful. She bring up like some of our TV shows, some of our culture. So I think a lot of Quebecer saw themselves on her, especially she's immigrant. She came to Quebec first. She was really welcomed by us. So it was kind of nice to see not only like they came to search like the Quebec heart, but also the Canadian heart. So it was really interesting to hear and to see.
Well, let's go to a quick ad break, and then we will come back with some more Trudeau Liberals being under fire, both at home and internationally.
We're facing an imminent threat. A planned blackout of all news content in Canada is coming to Facebook and Instagram, threatening to silence rebel news and those who depend on us for the other side of the story. The cause? Well, Justin Trudeau's new censorship law, Bill C-18, which demands social media companies pay news outlets for the news stories their users share on the platform. It's a shakedown and a desperate attempt to keep the mainstream media afloat. It seems the billions in taxpayer subsidies just aren't enough to keep the country's propagandists in business. But Meta, Facebook's parent company, has chosen to block Canadian news content rather than comply, Rebel News included. Many have already lost their ability to access our Facebook and Instagram pages. The blackout will soon affect every user in Canada. But fear not, we have had a plan to protect your access to our news content. We've partnered with Private Internet Access, PIA, a VPN provider dedicated to safeguarding digital privacy. For just $2 a month, you can maintain your access to our content across all your devices. And unlike other VPN providers, PIA does not store any user data as it's automatically deleted from their servers to avoid leaks and government subpoenas for information. Their servers are located in all 50 states, not the ones in communist China. You can visit piavpn.com/rebelnews and enjoy an exclusive 83% discount and 4 months free. Use it to bypass regional restrictions and stream your favorite shows from anywhere in the world. And stick it to Trudeau's new censorship law. Safeguard freedom of speech and join us to combat Trudeau's censorship today at piavpn.com/rebelnews.
All right, so just
was
so we're
just
still
go-
on the topic.
I was just going to say, like, since I have my VPN, my life is way better.
Yeah, you can access all the content that the Liberals don't want you to see. And so while we're on the topic still of Conservative and Liberals, we'll just share with you quickly this Toronto Star article where it says that millennials are nearly twice as likely to vote for Conservatives over Liberals. And that's according to a survey. So millennials are that generation between 1981 and 1994, 95, 96-ish. So roughly 25 and 40-year-olds. And I'm a little surprised at this because at the events that we run or the things that we cover, I often see a little bit of an older demographic. So I hear a lot of this from kind of my friend circle and my social circle, but I don't see a lot of it out in the wild, so to speak. And so this is great for me that those previous Liberal captured demographic has now switched gears and seeing, again, I think people are starting to see how much their failed policies is hitting them in the pocketbooks. And people of this age demographic, they can no longer, if they have a house, they can't afford it anymore. If they don't have a house, good luck getting into the market. It's a complete disaster. Inflation's through the roof. Cost of living is insane. And so you're starting to see more and more Canadians get involved and starting to care about what's happening sociopolitically and socioeconomically as a result of that. So this found that the Tories are polling at 40% among Canadian millennials, ahead of NDP at 24% and the Liberals at a mere 21%. Among the younger generation, Gen Z, the Conservatives also hold a strong lead at 32%, 6% points over the NDP and 8% percentage points ahead of the Liberals. Overall, among all Canadians, the survey found Conservatives would capture 38% of the vote, followed by the Liberals at 26% and Jagmeet Singh's NDP with 19%. So that, that speaks volumes there, how Canadians are feeling and how failed the Liberals have been throughout the last few years and really not trying to make amends at all. And I think people are now obviously waking up to the fact that the Liberals are inept and want to bring, I have to say it, what Polyev says, bring common sense home. People are really craving that rational approach politically.
What really concerned me is to see the yellow growing, the NPD growing over the different generation, because we know that we live in a society that now mainstream media and everybody is just going with fear mongering around climate change, and people are going to NPD or Quebec Solidarity at home because they are the one who are actually propagating some fear, crazy fear about climate change. So we see that this is into the school institution too. So my only point is probably the next generation, the yellow, but the yellow or the NPD will grow again and again and again. So I think my concern is mostly there.
Yeah. Well, and we're seeing, it's funny right now, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, just to source another article, because we have a few things to cover here I want to get through before we have to wrap things up. But this National Post article shows that, so over the past weekend, Trudeau was in India for the G20 Leaders Summit, and he's currently stranded there because his aircraft has experienced some sort of technical issues and it won't be fixed overnight. So whether or not that has been remedied, I guess we're soon to find out. But this comes after he faced criticisms from the Indian government. As per the Globe and Mail, the Indian Prime Minister Modi conveyed strong concerns about protests in Canada against India to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on the sidelines of the G20 summit that just took place in New Delhi. according to a statement by India. And we actually have a clip here to share with you. Well, the first one is what Trudeau said, and then we'll show you a really funny opposition clip thereafter. So maybe we can just play that first. This comes from the Post Millennial, this clip of Trudeau in India.
Two issues you
Sorry in
mention,
advance.
One that has been reported by the Indian media, quoting Indian government sources who say Prime Minister Modi spoke to you about the presence, in his terms, of Sikh Khalistani militants in Canada. And the second is the question of interference in Canada by India, which has been cited by Canada's own intelligence agencies. Did neither of those topics come up?
No, they both came up over the years with Prime Minister Modi. We've had many conversations on both of those issues. Obviously, Canada will always defend freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, freedom of peaceful protest. That's something that's extremely important to us. At the same time as we're always there to prevent violence, to push back against hatred. I think on the issue of the community, it's important to remember that the actions of the few do not represent the entire community or Canada. The flip side of it, we also highlighted the importance of respecting the rule of law, and we did talk about foreign interference.
Just to deflect a little bit there.
It's just like at the end, like it's just like, and we talk about it, foreign interference. It's just like, sloop.
Yeah. By the way, we did also discuss this, even though you didn't ask about it at all. And that kind of like seems to be Trudeau just has a script that he has to stick to. And, you know, as you were also finding with the Liberal Party members that you were asking questions to, you know, they have a script that they're going to just repeat and parrot, and they can't deter or detract from that because they don't otherwise know what to say or how to handle themselves. And, you know, I'm not a huge, I'm not a true believer in Pierre Poilievre, for instance. And, you know, I think we should always be vigilant to be critical and think critically and ask critical questions of anyone who's in charge of leading a country, for instance. But you need to be able to answer questions and think on your feet. And Trudeau has shown repeatedly that he just lacks that capability. And judging by his cabinet ministers who are not chosen appropriately, in my opinion, they can't do it either. So we have another clip here to share from the Post Millennial. Sorry, I didn't realize there was two. And then we'll get into this really funny news clip from an Indian news network.
Hi, what did Canada contribute in UK?
As always, Canada is a strong voice for inclusion of gender language, inclusion of Indigenous reflections, but all throughout we made sure that countries around the world are focused on growing the economy in inclusive ways, creating opportunity and prosperity for everyone in a more peaceful, more secure world, respect for the rule of law, ambition on fighting climate change. These are all things that Canada pushes for at every summit, among others, and we will continue to.
Oh my God. I have the impression that he threw like a bunch of words together, and it just doesn't make sense at all. Like gender, language, and climate change, and like rule of law, and tons of other words like that in the same sentence. It's doesn't really answer the question.
Well, of course, no, you have to skirt it because it's not part of your talking points. But an inclusive economy, well, and I don't, you know, not to make this a trucker centric live stream, but what about the truckers that took to your nation's capital to air their grievances with being prevented from doing their job in our economy because of a ridiculous, nonsensical, non-evidence-based vaccine mandate being put forward by, I mean, collectively it was Prime Minister Trudeau and the President of the United States, Joe Biden, but Biden arguably just kind of followed suit with whatever Trudeau was doing. And so, you know, how was that inclusive? How was that part of generating robust economic activity and growth? It's just absolutely absurd. And luckily you have media like ours that calls it out and calls it as we see it. But the Indian, this one Indian news outlet did the exact same. And it's actually really funny to see the kind of coverage that Trudeau gets abroad, because he's really the laughingstock of the country. He's a clown on the world stage. There's no denying that. Every time he goes to one of these trips, it's just like a complete national embarrassment for Canadians. So I think this is about a 9-minute clip, but we'll play maybe the first 2 minutes or so before we go to another ad break.
Canadian Prime Minister, he's had, of course, a meeting with Prime Minister Modi, and this is what he's come out and said. Let me quote this. Both the issues came up over the years with PM Modi. We've had many conversations on both those issues. Canada will always defend the freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, and freedom of peaceful protest, and it is extremely important to us. At the same time, we are always there to prevent violence and to push back against hatred. I think on the issue of the community, it is important to remember that actions of a few do not represent the entire community or Canada. The flip side of it, we have also highlighted the importance of respecting the rule of law, and we did talk about foreign interference. This is on the issue of Khalistan. So Justin Trudeau, let's listen in. Then I want to discuss what this fellow says.
Over the years with Prime Minister Modi, we've had many conversations on both of those issues. Obviously, Canada will always defend freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, freedom of peaceful protest. That's something that's extremely important to us. At the same time, as we're always there to prevent violence, to push back against hatred. I think on the issue of the community, it's important to remember that the actions of the few do not represent the entire community or Canada. The flip side of it, we also highlighted the importance of respecting the rule of law, and we did talk about foreign interference.
Okay, so I'm going to now shed the diplomatics, because when something manifestly insane takes place in your face, there's no reason to be polite about it. Justin Trudeau has just shown you the finger when it comes to Khalistan. This man has just come after imposing an emergency in his country to crack down on the freedom of expression and the right to peaceful protest, and has just talked about the freedom of expression and the rule of law and the right to protest. Okay? Now the truth is, Mr. Trudeau, like any good Punjabi, I have family in Canada, and I promise you, the nonsense that you're talking is emanating from sheer hubris, a total disconnected view of the world, where you think that we don't see what you're up to, we don't understand what you're up to, and you can continue behaving in a totally nonsensical fashion, talking nonsense. You imposed an emergency in your country, your father imposed an emergency in your country, your democratic credentials are under deep question, and if Khalistan is a problem, and if a Khalistan is to be created, it is more likely it is going to be created within the territorial boundaries of Canada. And let me add to that, we should become, or at least I will, become the biggest proponent of the independence of Quebec, which has been trying to secede from Canada for the longest period of time. And I have a big question.
Yeah, all of that kind of aside, the larger issues there of Quebec and so on. I noticed, I note here that he says manifestly insane. I mean, imagine our mainstream media could speak like that over the absolute nonsensical, hypocritical things that Justin Trudeau says and does. Sheer hubris. I mean, repeatedly, I say, sitting up in their ivory towers, completely out of touch with what real everyday Canadians are going through. That's the Liberal Party of Canada. And with a disconnected view of the world. And so that kind of one lens into the other, just sitting up in your ivory tower, being blissfully unaware that anybody's struggling, and continuing to push your ridiculous agendas, like climate change and this carbon tax, and the idea that taxing everybody to oblivion will somehow cool the earth and capture carbon. It is manifestly insane. He's calling it like it is. And I'm here for it.
And if you listen what Justin Trudeau say, he say the action of the few doesn't represent Canada. Okay, so for you that apply, But when it was a convoy and they had one flag around almost like hundreds of thousands of people, the action of the few began the action of the total of the person. So there is a double standard right there.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and the hypocrisy, I mean, I'm up to my ears in it at this point. You can't even keep track because it seems like there's a new hypocritical thing happening every single day. But I know we said we'd go to an ad break, but I'm just taking note here. I do have an interview lined up shortly after the live stream. So I'm just going to get through this next clip that we have, and we'll chat about it before we get into some of our Rumble rants. And we'll just skip that ad break because we're running out of time. And thanks so much for your in-depth analysis, Alexa, about what happened at the Conservative Convention. So to get some more Ontario-specific newsworthy hits here, this was Doug Ford. He was in Kitchener over the weekend at Ford Fest, and we caught some clips. Our super producer Efron was on the scene, and he caught a clip here of Ford denouncing how these radical rogue school boards have instituted their own willy-nilly policies to gender affirm and social transition children without their parents' knowledge and or consent.
We're making sure we're making the appropriate changes in education, focusing on what matters. That's math, writing, arithmetic, engineering, making sure they understand the fiscal responsibility. But most important is the parents' rights. The parents' rights to listen and make sure they are informed when their children make a decision. They can't, it's not up to the teachers, it's not up to the school boards to indoctrinate our kids. It's the parents' responsibility to hear what the kids are doing and not the school boards. I can't even figure out what school boards do nowadays, by the way.
You and me both, Mr. Ford. You and me both.
I'm wondering if it would change like his mind in like 2 seconds as he did like before. It's flip-flopping all the time. So I will see in the future if he's not like changing his mind on that.
Yeah, and how it's actually implemented on the ground, right? You can say all of these things and they sound all good and well as you're spewing it. And this just to give some context here. And I don't know what happened. I'm trying to pull up this web page. So I wrote a newsjack, a written piece about this back in August. But this is in terms of Ontario Education Minister Stephen Lecce. He has legislated new powers to himself, which is always kind of a risky thing. I don't agree that heavy-handed legislation should be necessary, but in certain instances, and in terms of these rogue school boards, it may be necessary. But it's called the Better Schools and Student Outcomes Act, and it's supposed to increase transparency and accountability of the school boards. So if you scroll down a little bit on that page, there's a tweet embedded from Stephen Lecce himself. We're following through on our commitment to parents, back to basics in the classroom, accountability on school boards, and empowering the voices of parents, right? Because last year's school year, we saw parents like Nick Marabito in Ottawa, who was saying like any boy who can come in and just all of a sudden arbitrarily decide I'm a female, I'm a woman, and can use the bathroom with my daughters, this gives me grave safety concerns for my children. And when he was expressing his concerns over this policy and how it could be maybe better applied, or if there was a gender-free washroom, but still the girls' washroom and the boys' washroom that are specific to male and female, and then maybe you have a third option, which I believe the school does have, that one specific to anybody who wants to be gender fluid or non-binary or whatever it is that they want to identify with. And that could be a changing fluid thing from day to day. And he was actually cut off and silenced by, we know, this radical school trustee, Nellie Kaplan-Murr. And so it's instances like this where parents have legitimate concerns, like pornographic content being found in their school libraries for young grade school children. The surveys that are being instituted by the school boards being put forward in the school system, unbeknownst again to parents, without their knowledge, without their consent. When parents raise these concerns, they're labeled far right, misogynist, transphobes. And so this, I think, if you read between the lines on some of what the government's putting forward, was a way to try to increase, as they say, the accountability and the transparency, and empower the voices of parents to actually be heard and play that role again in their children's education. So we'll see how it actually gets instituted on the ground. What I noticed just as a parent this year so far is that there's far less PA days, which I thought was interesting, because part of this legislation mandates school boards to share what is on the agenda on PA days. And so there used to be at least one, if not two PA days every month, from what I remember in previous years. And this year I was looking at the school calendar and there's maybe one a month. Some months there isn't one at all. And so that really stood out to me first and foremost, that school boards are kind of maybe scrambling, going, oh, wait, we have to like put forward an agenda. What are we working on this day? And if there's nothing to work on, then we can't take a PA day. So, the school year has just started. We're only the second weekend, but I think we'll start to hear more rumblings and grumblings from parents on either side about what's happening. But we know that the vast majority of Canadian parents, have said that the schools are on the wrong track and need a course correction, and B, agree that parents, especially in children under 16, 18, should be informed that their children are trying to socially or otherwise transition at school. So this is definitely a majority thing that parents are taking that sensible approach to.
It's crazy when it's just crazy when you think that it goes that far for people to realize that maybe we need to take action.
Well, I think that I think parents and the population at large are just so consumed by the rat race, right? You work your 9 to 5, you get home, if you're a full-time working parent and your children go to school, there's not a lot of time left at the end of the day to actually parent. And well, first and foremost, that's really sad. But secondly, parents are just so consumed by the rat race that they forget that they still need to have a role in their child's education and get to know the school, get to know the teacher, get to know the principal. Ask your children, what are they learning? What are they teaching you about? If you hear these words, come be on high alert. And that education really starts at home first and foremost. And I think parents have just trusted that the system had their children's best interests at heart, that they were teaching them their, reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's the 3 R's. That's their traditional curriculum that used to be housed within public schools. And somewhere along the line, that took a serious left turn. And it's time to get a course correct. And parents are only now becoming more and more and increasingly aware that this is happening. And I think that is also due to independent media, who are saying, hey, what is these weird terms that our kids are learning about? And why are these graphic novels depicting sexual acts and other things that are, grotesque and inappropriate? Why are they coming to our school system? Why is a drag queen coming to read our kindergartners' stories in the library? Like, what happened to the librarian? And so I think that highlights the importance of independent media and the ability to again think critically and ask those questions without being gaslit or disregarded, because then no one wins then when we just have one idea at the arena of ideas. So we have a couple Rumble rants that we'll get to before we wrap up the stream. Thank you to Fraser McBurney for your contribution. It's been over a month and the government still has not told the truth about the over 325 children who are missing from the Maui fire and why the school buses were missing on the day of the fire. Alexa, you were there in Maui. Can you speak to that at all?
But of course, they didn't say how many children was found dead. Also, there is a problem with the DNA, because a burning body is a burning body. Sometimes like it takes time to know who is the person. I think a lot of people wants to know like how many children are in the victim, because we know that it was supposed to be the first day of school and the school was canceled. A lot of the kids were supposed to be not at home, but a lot of them were at home without network, without any signal to warn them to leave the home. Either the parents were not capable to reach out to them to say to evacuate. So a lot of people, not only on the ground, but a lot of people think that on the victim will be a lot of children. And the school bus, I don't know about that, but there was no school that day, so probably there was no school bus either. So school was closed. It was closed because the wind was too strong, because there were no electricity, no power. So I don't think the focus should be on the school bus, but mostly that wants to know how many children are on the victim.
Mm-hmm. And of course, how to prevent such a devastating tragedy from happening again, which seems pretty clear to me that it would be to have sounded the alarm. That just makes no sense that the authorities decided, oh, well, if we sound the alarm, people will run for the hills, which is where the fire is coming from. I think that at that point you can see for yourself, oh, wow, there's massive fires blowing our way. We better not run directly into it. I think it's a reoccurring theme that our officials think that we're dumb and don't have the capability to think for ourselves and think critically and manage a situation. And that's really sad, because there was a lot of lives lost needlessly in that tragedy.
And it's even worse when you think that because of the wind and because the Hawaiian Electric that didn't like spend money to keep their infrastructure and their power line adequate. A lot of those power lines fall on the ground on the main road, stopping people to evacuate the town, because the police, they had as order to not let pass car on power line, because this is dangerous for electrification. So they were sending back people directly where the fire was. So people were kind of trapped in that town, and unfortunately, a lot of people die in their car. And this is like really heartbreaking when you think that nobody told them, like, just run into the field, run into like the property of someone to just escape and save your life.
Yeah, it's really, really sad. I'm just looking at the second Rumble rant here. Orisia, I think I pronounced that correctly, gives $10. The current Canadian flag is the same color as China, the Liberal Party, and blood, ? Time for an update to the Canadian flag. Again, 5 or 6 flags before to reflect a coast-to-coast flag. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm actually just looking up the flags of British North America, the historic flags. I mean, all of them mostly have incorporated some sort of red. I guess the very first flag was mostly blue. But, you can find symbolism in quite literally everything. And so I don't think there will be ever a time that everyone will be happy with one specific thing. I don't know that that should be a priority right now, is to update the Canadian flag, especially in light of, you had those hysterical Liberals and hysterical citizens, low information citizens of Ottawa, who are saying, oh, the Canadian flag is now tainted for me because of the Freedom Convoy, and how dare they use this flag in this way to protest peacefully at our nation's capital. And so some people are really like slighted by this use of the Canadian flag, and I think would probably love to see it updated. I don't know that that's a good use of resources or taxpayer dollars at this point, but the Liberals just re-envisioned and reimagined and redesigned the passport. So then again, I wouldn't put it past them. I don't personally think that that's a priority, but yeah, red does have connotations with, I guess, China, the Liberal Party, and certainly blood. whether or not that's worthwhile to redesign a flag over. I don't know. What do you think, Alexa?
But first of all, why Quebec is blue, it's because we represent the French and we represent like the fleur de lis. But if the Canadian flag is red, it's because it represents the roses, because the English came and they win, so they represent the red. So I don't think there is like nothing to change on our flag. I think maybe some people doesn't like it. Maybe it's red, like China is red too. But I think that it's a part of our culture, and changing it will erase a part of our culture as woke one. They want to erase a part of us, a part of our history, a part of our culture, as what Justin Trudeau did with the Canadian passport, erasing some important monument to put like picture of himself or picture of like snowballs. So I think right now what we need to do is preserve what we have, preserve our history, our heritage, and make sure that we always remember what he did, though.
That's right. And I think the Canadian flag, the reason why it uses red, and maybe someone in the chats could let me know if I'm wrong, but it's because of the red maple. That's also our national symbol, is that Canadian maple. So yeah, thanks for your comment. That's interesting. And I'm on the Government of Canada website. Yeah, you can see we pulled up there's posters here actually that you can order, which are kind of fun. And if you're nerd like I am, I would totally hang one of these things in my office. Maybe you'll see one behind me here soon. But there's all these different flags of British North America, the provinces, the territories. You can scroll through and then you can click on the links there to get the poster and pull it up. But there's historical flags. And so it's kind of cool to look back on, maybe you learned this at some point in your life and then forgot about it like me. But yeah, it's definitely worth noting and maybe looking into further. So with that, we're about 11 minutes past the hour. And if there's no other Rumble rants, then we'll wrap this up. Thanks so much for joining me, Alexa, and for giving some keynotes from the unfoldings over the weekend at the Conservative Convention. Thank you to all of our viewers at home who support our work. Thanks to all of our Rumble ranters who share your rants with us and help to keep our independent journalism afloat. And of course, everybody behind the scenes who makes this stream possible. Super producer Efron, the back end there, pulling up all these links for us and sharing visuals on screen. Everybody who, even shares this on social media and comes up with the verbiage used to get our message across and the topics that we'll be discussing with you. So we'll see you again the same time and place tomorrow from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. And I guess, as David Menzies would always say, stay safe and stay sane.
Stay sane.
Do you want to start feeling like your pre-COVID self again? You're not alone. The wellness company's Spike Support Formula is an all-natural supplement to help people do just that. It was created by cardiologist Peter McCullough and his expert team of doctors to help the people experiencing effects from COVID and the you-know-what. Go to twccanada.health/rebel today. Do you want to start feeling like your pre-COVID self again? You're not alone. The wellness company's Spike Support Formula is an all-natural supplement to help people do just that. It was created by cardiologist Peter McCullough and his expert team of doctors to help the people experiencing effects from COVID and the you-know-what. Go to twccanada.health/rebel today.